Does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I have a further amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 68, printed in Part A of House Report number 118-147, offered by Mr. Obernolte of California.
Pursuant to House Resolution 597, the gentleman from California, Mr. Obernolte, and a member of opposed each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from California.
Mr. Speaker, aviation fuel is one of the few fuels remaining that still contains lead. It's been universally acknowledged that lead is not good for our environment, it's not good for our children, it's not good for human ingestion, it causes serious health problems. The industry has conducted a decades-long study and process to try to develop an alternative fuel that takes the lead out of aviation fuel. However, this has become a very, very troublesome and difficult task because the only suitable solutions would have to be suitable for all types of aviation engines. And some aircraft feature engines that are higher horsepower and higher compression that depend on the presence of lead to be able to operate safely. Finally, we are approaching a consensus standard on an unleaded replacement for aviation gas. However, there is a problem that has arisen. Airports accept grant funds from the Airport Improvement Program, and in return, they give the FAA grant assurances that they will keep their airports open. In 2018, when FAA was reauthorized, it was agreed by this body that an airport should not be able to withdraw the sale of fuel and that would be completely, and that would be a violation of its FAA AIP grant assurances. I think that is still true, and I hope we all still feel that way. However, most airports only have a single infrastructure for the delivery of avgas. If an airport seeks to switch from this current standard, which is 100 low lead, to an unleaded replacement, a question has arisen as to whether or not that would be a violation of its grant assurances. This amendment clarifies that situation and states that when an industry standard consensus emerges, that it is not a violation of grant assurance for an airport to switch from leaded aviation fuel to unleaded aviation fuel. I think that this protects the interests of our airports, of our pilot community, and also protects our environment at the same time. I would urge its adoption. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition?
I claim time in opposition to this amendment.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I rise in opposition to it. Aviation is the only segment of transportation still using leaded fuels. The health impacts of leaded fuels are well documented up to this point, and the aviation industry writ large has been making a good faith effort to transition to unleaded fuels. The FAA closely regulates the availability of fuels at public airports because it's a critical element to flight safety. The underlying bill text, as well as the manager's amendment offered by Chairman Graves and the ranking member, clarifies the fuel availability requirements at airports in line with the aviation industry timeline for transitioning away from leaded fuels. This amendment is written both confusingly and it is unnecessary. Unlike what the summary claims, it would reduce airports' flexibility to meet the FAA's requirements for fuel availability. Specifically, it would narrow the types of unleaded fuels that airports are required to provide under the bill. And for that reason, I oppose this amendment and urge all members to do the same. And with that, I reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I hope there's been no confusion here. We are all on the same team. We want to get the lead out of aviation fuel. This amendment allows us to do that. The current situation is that when an industry standard consensus fuel emerges, that airports will not be able to switch over to it, because if you only have a single infrastructure, a single fuel truck or a single fuel tank, the current grant assurances require you to continue offering the leaded fuel. So airports will be faced with an impossible choice, the choice between maintaining a leaded fuel even though an unleaded replacement is available, or buying an entirely different infrastructure for the delivery of the unleaded fuel. I think we can all agree that makes no sense. This is just a common sense solution to that problem. We've worked with committee staff on this. We've worked with industry on this. I think this is something that everyone should be able to get behind. With that, I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Thank you. I believe that we are trying to achieve the same goals here, and I appreciate the gentleman's approach, but I do believe that it is restrictive and not intentionally so, but as a matter of consequence. And that's why I'm going to continue to oppose this amendment. Not every airport has the flexibility to do what Representative Obernolte suggests that is available to them. And because of that, I'm going to remain opposed to this, and I ask that my colleagues remain opposed, those who are opposed. And with that, I will reserve and will close at the appropriate time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To be clear, we are trying to give airports the option of a transition to an unleaded aviation fuel when that option becomes available to them. Some language is needed to do this because airports are confused about whether or not doing this is a violation of their FAA grant assurances. This amendment clarifies that it is not. An amendment, to be clear, is needed to clarify this situation. So I respectfully urge adoption of my amendment, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Thank you. Again, Mr. Speaker, not all companies have unleaded fuel that meets the standards that the gentleman suggests. And I wish I could read this writing here. I would present a more eloquent rebuttal, but unfortunately can't read the scribble. So at this point, did the gentleman yield back the balance of his time? At this point, I will yield the balance of my time.